drive RC, and I let them drive my Nitro Truggy and my 8-scale stuff. I don't give them a fully loaded radio with the full 100% throttle. I turn it down to 20% so they can learn the characteristics of the car, so they can actually drive it without crashing and getting away from it too quickly. So what I'm actually really getting at by asking the question is how fast should we make the car is, if you're a newer driver, you're just picking it up, you want to start with a slower car. You want to learn what it's going to do in the air, and if the car is too fast, it's going too fast down the straightaway, you're overcorrecting and you're crashing, it's not going to be good. It's going to be detrimental to your practicing habits. So I think a slower car is a lot better if you're just learning how to get things going, and as you get more comfortable with the car, progressively, build up your speed, and then that will actually help out with the practice.
Yeah. I think like people today have such a huge advantage with brushless and LiPo. Like back when I started, like I had to buy a lathe and figure out how to cut brush motors. I'm sure some of the older guys here remember that kind of stuff. And like, you'd run 3-4 times and your motor was junk and you had to rebuild it. And like today you can just throw battery after battery after battery and the motor just stays the same. And further, to Jim Edmonds' point, like you have so much control over the speed of your car. Like, and I like the 8.5 for two-wheel for kind of novice or intermediate driver, because like Jim says, you can turn down the EPA, you can kind of detune it, you can turn down the timing on the end bell, you can make it your speed, and then as you get faster and better, as that consistency, you're looking at that fast lap in that top 5, and it's hitting that 0.1 tenth or 0.2 tenths, and you're looking for, all right, how do I go faster now? Well, now you can tune it up a little bit, turn up your timing, add a little boost, those kind of things. So you can really tailor, using your electronics, using your ESC and your radio, you can really tailor your car to your driving ability at almost any level. Sure.
Answer this first.
Yeah, go ahead.
What kind of tire source would you like to run out here for a four-wheel drive truck?
What kind of tire?
Like compound.
I think anything soft, super soft, so like Big Concepts green or black, aka soft, super soft, would be pretty good. On trucks, a lot of times I like to run a slightly harder compound up front. So like, again, using JC, I'd run like a black in the rear and a green up front, or green in the rear, blue up front, just to take a little steering out, to make it easy to drive, kind of, carve around the track instead of wanting to grab and spin out. Yeah, I think with the way the dirt's hard packed, but there's not like a groove showing, or it doesn't look like we're going to be wearing out tires in 1 or 2 runs. Like I think the softer compounds are going to grip the track a little better. Go ahead.
A couple questions.
Sure.
If we would, talk about roll and how that affects your vehicle's handling,
Okay.
the roll, and shock oils and shock positioning.
Okay.
The shock towers and the
All right. Roll center is fundamentally one of the hardest things to grasp in RC, right? And the reason is because, like, there's an optimal setting, right, for any given track, any given car. Like, say there's an optimal setting. If you go too far one way or too far the other way, your car will act the same. So it's really hard to know which side of optimal setting you're on, all right? And let me describe that. Like, so your roll center, and I could actually, I don't want to do this in front of everybody, but if you want to, come and talk to me tonight or tomorrow, and I can show you how to find your roll center. It's actually not terribly hard. Like, you can look at your suspension and draw out, there's my roll center. What your roll center is it defines the point at which the chassis will roll. So when your chassis is going side to side, like there's some physical point that it rolls around, right? You could find the center of that circle.
Can I restate that?
Sure.
When your chassis is rolling, it's making a circle. Where is the center of the circle?
The roll center, right. And the real relationship that we're concerned with is how far below your center of gravity is the roll center, okay? Your center of gravity, is somewhere like up here, and I'm just picking a point, right? And your roll center, again, I could draw it out and show you, is going to be like, say, around chassis level. So there's some like distance between the center of gravity and that roll center. As you raise your roll center, as you bring that roll center towards the center of gravity of the car, okay, it becomes easier for the car to roll. Again, getting back to that kind of moments that we were talking about, that pendulum, well, as you shorten up that pendulum, it's easier for the car to roll around the roll center, okay? So a higher roll center is easier to roll. It's softer. Okay.
The car will
So
roll
the
more.
car, yeah, no. The car will initiate the roll faster. It will lean into the corner faster. It will square up out of the corner faster. But it won't transfer as much weight. Because that moment is smaller, you know, the amount that it rolls is like ultimately you're throwing less weight to the outside tire. So by raising your roll center, you are softening the car, but you're reducing the ultimate traction on that end of the vehicle. Okay? Lowering your roll center does the opposite. Lowering your roll center is going to make that end of the car stiffer because it has a bigger moment. It's like driving a rear motor car. It's harder to rotate, right? Lowering that roll center makes it stiffer, but once the car is in the corner, you will have more ultimate traction. Okay? So this all comes back. I said that like the two opposite ends feel like each other. If you have too small of a roll moment, if your car, you know, if it's too small, it's rolling all over the place, like your car's going to roll over and then it's going to spin out because there's not enough weight on that outside tire. There's not enough traction out there, right? If you have too big of a roll moment, your car's going to go into the corner and there's not going to be enough force to get it to actually roll and transfer any weight, and it's going to spin out. You see what I mean? So like, you know, a guy says, my car's spinning out in the corner, you know, how should I adjust my camber links? Well, it's, you know what I mean? Like, we could stiffen or soften it to fix the problem. Now, it's not, no. It's not terribly difficult to decipher, okay? But it does take a careful eye and some concentration on how the car is actually working, okay? You got to watch, you know, you need to watch the lean of the car. And maybe it would help to hand your radio to a buddy and go watch it from track level, you know, get down at the car's level. Or have a buddy watch your car and you drive it. And he can tell you if that car is leaning over and then spinning out kind of after the apex, your roll centers are probably too low, right? Too small. Because you're not getting enough weight transfer, you're not digging in with that outside tire, right?
The apex I spin out.
If your car is like not even entering the corner and it spins out, like if you turn the wheels and the rear end just comes around, I'm mostly talking about the rear end right now, but the same things apply up front, you know. Like if you turn the wheels and your car just spins before it seems to roll or before it digs in or before it engages the track, like your roll center's too low.
I have a question that you can answer.
Sure.
On camber links, you can raise the inside or lower the inside. You can raise or lower the outside. When your camber links look like this, is that a high roll center or a low roll center?
That's a very low roll center.
And when your camber links look like this,
That's a very high roll center.
okay,
So it's yeah,
backwards.
it's backwards.
That's what I want to know.
Adding a washer to the inside, going to a frowny face, is going to lower your roll center. And the way I like to think of it is like, you know, if your links are like
And
this,
lowering
like,
the roll center makes that distance greater.
yeah. But you know, this is sloppy physics, but it's intuitive. You know, if your links are really high, like your car doesn't want to roll, it's stiff. If your links are really low, like it's really easy for that chassis to roll back and forth. Okay. Now, moving a little more closer to your car, adjusting your link up and down, like adding or taking out a washer, is a small adjustment. Going to a different hole in the car is a big adjustment.
Okay.
Right? So like I often decide what link I want to run, and then I'll fine tune the washers from there. Further, changing out on the hub carrier or out on your caster block is a bigger change than changing the inside, in my opinion. Okay? Changing the outside will change how that end of the car drives. And then you can set your link length from there. So like, you know, using the rear hub of my car as an example, the further out on the hub carrier I go, the more square my car drives. Like that, you know, it'll dig in harder, and like that cliff, when the car starts sliding, it's like sudden. Like when my car breaks free, it's just gone. The further in on the hub carrier I come, the more traction the rear end will have, and it'll be like a drifty traction. Like the car will like power slide, like drifto, you know, like just counter steer and punch it.
Kind of lazy in a way.
Yeah, and then I'll say, so I find the hub carrier location that I want to run, and then I set my link length on the inside, and then I further fine tune with my washers. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now, right, so that's camber links. Well, the next thing was shock oil.
Position and oil. shock
Okay.
position on the
Shock position. Just like the hubs where I said the outside is more important to me than the inside, your location on your shock arm is way more important than your location on the tower. All right? Your location on the arm is going to set the entire attitude of the suspension. The further out you are, the stiffer it is. And the reason for that is that your shock has more of a mechanical advantage on the arm, right? Like if you think about those levers, the further out the shock is mounted, like the stiffer it's going to be. Outside is going to carry more corner speed, but it's going to have less traction, and it's not going to jump as well, in general. So I like to run as far out as I can, as I can get away with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like ultimately, I'd be running the outside hole on the car, but like I can tell you, I went to Reedy race, and I knew it was going to be high traction, so I initially was going to be on the outside hole where I wanted to be. Excuse me. But when I saw all the jumps in the layout, like before I'd even run a battery pack, I just came into the center. Because I was like, there are so many jumps, I need my car to launch and land better. You know, I need it to be under firm control, I need it to feel good. I don't care as much about corner speed. That's that trade-off I mentioned kind of in my notes. So set your lower, again, set your hub carrier first, well set your lower shock position first, okay? And on this kind of track where it's pretty low bite, kind of dusty and bumpy, like you're going to tend to be on the inside. Okay. Once you have the inside set in the tower is your shock angle. And there, again, kind of like setting washers, like the more laid down the shock is, the more progressive it's going to be, the more corner speed you're going to have, but the worse it's going to jump, and the less forward bite. As you stand the shocks up, like your car is going to, remember I was talking about all that weight transfer stuff and the torque digging in? Like the further stood up your shocks are, like the easier time that stuff has of acting. Like your car, the rear end's going to feel softer. It's going to engage the track, dig in better. You know, and it's going to jump and land better. But again, your sacrifice, it's always a sacrifice of corner speed. I think the general kind of engineering principle is set up the car as stiff as you can get away with. Because, you know, until you're spinning out, until you can't jump anymore, that kind of thing. Because the stiffer it is, like the faster you can go, ultimately. The harder you can throw it into the corner, you know, and the more you're going to get out of the car. Finally, shock oil. Shock oil is integral with your piston, right? Like, I never change my shock oil without thinking about the piston. That doesn't mean I won't just change the shock oil, but you got to keep both in mind. So a basic, shocks work by packing up. They have what I like to call a static damping, where you just put tires on your car and feel it on the bench, you know? And then they have a pack feeling. So when the shock moves quickly, when you're landing or taking off from a jump, or when you hit that bump on the straightaway, right? Like, and you can feel that if you take your car. Can I use your car?
Whichever. This one is
Yeah, that's fine. You can actually, it's kind of violent, but like you can see it. So this is static damping, right? Like everyone puts their car down and feels it, and oh man, that feels nice and smooth because he's got good O-rings. But if you want to feel your pack, like, you got to beat it a little bit. You got to simulate it's hitting a jump. And notice, so like when I do this, notice the wheel stays on the ground, right? When I do this, see how the wheels are coming off? That's because the shock's packed up and it's not letting that. Yeah.
When he means packed, he means that the piston is no longer moving up and down.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to get to the physics of it a little bit, there are two terms. There's laminar and turbulent flow. Anybody familiar with those? Laminar is nice, smooth flow. It's actually a big deal in airplanes, right? Like the wind flow is treated as a fluid going across the wing. And laminar is smooth, it's uninterrupted, it's nice. And turbulent is when you get all these little swirlies and curly cues and shit's going nuts, right? Well, your shock works by, when you're just pressing down on it smooth, that oil is passing through the piston real nice and easy, right? It's laminar, it's smooth. And when you put a sudden impact into it, essentially, the oil can't get through the piston fast enough. And since the oil is incompressible, it's like a hydraulic fluid, right? It gets all those little curly cues, the oil doesn't know where to go, and the shock packs up, right? Now, getting away from kind of the theoretical and more to the basics, using an associated shock, and I can, whatever. 1.6 and 30 weight is like the sweet center, okay? In a low C car, it's like a 55 or 56 with 30 weight, okay? And you'll notice in setups, like those two go together all the time, right? Like what's in the front end of every single associated car? 1.6, 30 weight.
Yeah.
What's in the front of every 22? 56, 30 weight, right? Like back in the day, it used to be like small bore shocks. It was number 2's 30 weight, and it was 56 and 30 weight, right? Well, you're essentially, and again, trying to keep away from the theoretical a bit, the oil is your static damping, and the piston is your pack, okay? A bigger hole piston is going to pack up less quickly, and it's going to, you know, because, yeah, your oil can go through it easier. It's pretty, you know, the pistons and oil make sense when you think about them, unlike roll centers where you can, like, get confused. Like, you know, if you think through it, a bigger hole piston is going to allow that oil to go more quickly, and it's not going to pack up as hard.
Is a tapered piston any better?
It's just different. So again, like you think about that taper, so all shocks have bypass. Like the oil doesn't just go through the holes, but it's going around the piston as well, between the piston and the shock wall. That's why machine pistons, like stepping out of the demo, if you're not running machine pistons in your associated shocks, get machine pistons. Like they're huge. They're way better because they fit that shock better and they don't allow near as much blow-by. But the tapered piston is working with that blow-by some, and it's allowing it to be like that flow is going to be smoother for longer. You know, like it's going to take more speed when you have that taper. It's going to take more speed to pack up, right? And that's why, like when you run the taper down, the shock's going to pack up faster this way, but then it's going to return to laminar flow, that smooth, damp, you know, static damping.
Which one would be better?
If I run tapered pistons, I would almost always run them down. Because you want the shock to return. You want it to pack up on landing and then return to ride height.
Quick.
We want that car at ride height as fast as you can get it there.
Got it.
So anyway, so getting back to kind of, you know, so that 1.6 30 weight or the 55 30 weight, right? Like you kind of look at a bunch of setups and you'll get a feel for what team's center is, okay? Then, if you want to adjust your static damping up and down, you can just go up 2.5 or 5 weight or down 2.5 and 5 weight, right? So again, like kind of a small, bumpy, lower traction track, like maybe you want to run 27 weight instead of 30, just to allow the car to roll a little more, get a little more body, you know? And so you're just going to drop your oil. And that won't change how it packs up much, because the piston's the same, okay? If you want to change your pack without changing the static damping, it's approximately 5 weight per piston size, roughly. It used to be easier with small bore. Like, go back to small bore associated shocks, you had 1, 2s, and 3s. Like, 1's 35, 2's 30, 3's 25. Those would all feel the same on the bench. You know, I could build 3 cars with those piston and oil combinations. And like if you went through and just used that static damping, they'd all feel the same. But then if you hit them violently and packed them up, like the smaller hole, you know, is going to pack up a lot faster than the bigger hole. So like if I have like a giant jump, you know, if some track has like a big triple, and it's like the feature of the track, like I got to hit this triple, I got to land it, doubling, singling is like half a second slower, right?
More pack.
I'd add more pack, especially in the back, okay? So like going to associated big bores, like it's kind of nice because you have the 1.5, 1.6, 1.7. So you could build your car like 1.6s all around, 30 up front, 25 in the back. You usually want the rear to be a little bit softer, right? And then if I had that big jump that I had to land, like I'd keep the 1.6s and 30 weight up front, but I'd go to a 1.5 with like 22.5 in the back. So I'd have a little bit thicker static damping and then a lot of pack in it to land that jump and keep the car going smooth. Now, another way to look at pistons and oil is that pistons affect your car everywhere and oil affects your car in the corners. That's kind of leaving all that stuff that I just said behind, you know, if like you don't want to think about that as much. Like that's actually something Matt Francis told me a long time ago, was pistons affect my car everywhere, so if I need my car to be stiffer, you know, if I need my shocks to be stiffer, I'll just go to a smaller piston all around, right? And he's like, if all I need is more traction in the corner, then I'll just drop 2.5 weight oil all around and let the car roll a little bit, you know. So that's a kind of an easy, quick rule of thumb way to look at it. Pistons affect jumping and cornering. Oil only affects cornering. But I'm an intellectual and I like to think about the more complicated. I like to screw myself up.
What are all the vehicles you make the